What is going on, Sens fans? Welcome to a live stream edition, an emergency episode of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brendan Parks. And as you know from the title, if you're here, you probably know as well, the Ottawa Senators have signed Joonas Korpisalo to a 5-year, $20 million contract. They have a new goalie. They went out and did it. Brennan, initial thoughts on this news that broke just a little under an hour into free agency.
Yeah, so I thought that this was going to happen. I predicted last night my one prediction for free agency. I didn't know how active they'd be. My one prediction was that they would sign Corpusalo. I love the signing in itself. I love adding Corpusalo. I've talked about it before, but he is coming off of an excellent season, like his best by far in the NHL. He posted, let's just get the numbers up here, 914 save percentage and 16.72 GSAX, which was like among the best in the NHL. He was legitimately good. Like I would say he was a high-end starter this past year. The 5 years before that were quite poor, like very bad. And he's 29. Again, the TSN panel was talking about this and they love it because this is the first year in which Corpusalo was healthy in a long time. He had hip surgery, I want to say last summer, and then he came back and was actually healthy this year and he looked a lot better. He's one of those very flexible and quick goalies. So obviously like he needs to be able to move and have mobility. I love it. My concern, the 5 years, that's the thing that stood out. I do think that the market was competitive and like a lot of goalies signed right off the bat. Carolina got Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta back immediately. Like they signed them both, and that's two huge names off the market. I don't want to say Pierre panicked, but I think that he was willing to pay a little more than maybe he initially wanted to for Corpusalo because you can't risk losing him. If they didn't get Corpusalo, you're in a tough spot with your goalies. So 5 years is risky, but if they can get Corpusalo at even half of what he was this past year, they have a very good like starting netminder. Like he doesn't even need to be as good as he was this year. He's going to tandem with Forsberg. I love the potential. $4 million a year for a starting goalie is not a lot if he can be a starting goalie. It's about staying healthy and being consistent like he was this past year.
So when you look, like immediately, you're right. I had the exact same reaction. It's a lot of term. It's a lot of term for a goalie. And did you say his age there? Did you list his age? He's late 20s, I believe, eh?
29, yeah.
29. Okay, so right in the middle of his prime. Like he'll be 34 at the expiration. So not that it's too much, whatever, but it's eye popping, right? We were talking about, last night we also went live. We were talking about the Ottawa tax. We're talking about you need to add something to lure players here, and I would imagine that the term was probably what drew him here, because I think people would have paid him $4 million. Other teams probably would have been okay doing that, but the 5 years is what does it. If you're a goalie, that's good security. If you look at it like this, look, Forsberg has 2 years left. If Corpusalo works out, let's say, you can usher in Sogard, Marilyn, and whoever you want it to be. It's not the end of the world. It's not like the reaction was a bad reaction necessarily. It's just it's eye popping. It's not a home run deal, whatever. It's a market value contract on day one of free agency, like we expected, right? But they needed to do this. They needed a goalie, whether it was through trade with DeBrincat, that clearly wasn't going to happen. So they go out and commit $4 million of their cap to Corpusalo. Obviously, too, Erik Brännström was signed earlier today. JBD was signed earlier today. Big thing about JBD was it's a one-way deal for both years at $800K. Essentially locking up their top pair or bottom pairing, I should say, in Brännström and JBD. Here's initial thoughts too. You now have $6.75 million tied up in your goalies for next season. I think that's pretty good based on it. And look, it's obviously all going to come down to, can they stop the puck? It's not like it's not a black and white thing with goalies. It's either you stop the puck or you don't, and you're effective enough or you're not. And that includes health. They need to both be able to stay healthy consistently enough where one of them doesn't have to play 30 games in a row as the starter if they're not ready for it. I like it, though. I like it. I think Corpusalo, when he went to the Kings at the deadline, that was their move to try and bolster their goaltending to get into the playoffs, and it worked because they ended up being in the Pacific Division, obviously, and being in the top three. He wasn't great against Edmonton, but then again, no one was. Edmonton he's just an offensive juggernaut, so he didn't look great. He didn't steal games for them, but I would say he outplayed Stuart Skinner in that series for the most part. Like, I don't know. And we got a question there in the chat. He is Finnish. Joonas Korpisalo is Finnish, so they have a Finnish and Swedish goaltending tandem right now. I'm again, we were kind of mentioning the Twitter is not working today for a lot of people. It's being weird with the refreshing on the timeline. So it's weird. You can still tweet, but you can't see everyone's tweets. But so this news was broken pretty quickly. I saw it on TSN. Yeah, and again, initial reaction for me was just a lot of term. AAV's fair. I like it, and they needed to do it. So Pierre, good for him. This is a good deal for him. He couldn't do nothing.
Yeah, and I just want to talk a little more about who Corpusalo is as a goalie and some of his strengths. So one thing they said on the TSN panel, and this is kind of assumed, is while he was in LA and obviously Columbus wasn't good, but he's not going to have that same infrastructure that he did in LA. And everybody talks about this. For one, I think Ottawa's defense is still being underrated, and they have upgraded that a lot from where they were last year. But Corpusalo, I've got the numbers up here. He actually faced the 10th most high danger shots against per 60 minutes among 40 starting goaltenders who played like more than 30 games. So he was actually in like the bottom 10 for how much, or the top 10 for how much he was facing in regards to quality of shots. He also had a .929 5v5 save percentage, which ranked 6th in the league. That was ahead of Saros, Shesterkin, Samsonov. Like he was actually very good. His one, like, kind of where his numbers dipped was on the penalty kill, but he faced a lot of like high danger chances. He was not in this easy situation in which people are saying like, he's not going to, or he's going to be facing way more high danger chances in Ottawa. No, he faced among the most in the league. I would actually say he might face less in Ottawa based on how they've upgraded their roster now. I really, the term does concern me. We can talk about that again, but it's fine. Like, you have to pay that if you're Ottawa. Like, again, you can't risk not getting a goalie today. 4 million, I don't think is that bad. The 6.75 allocated to goalies is totally reasonable. Most teams who have a legitimate starter are probably paying more than that. And maybe even significantly more. I think that's a fine number. I think this lets Sogard kind of develop as well. I know that you've been kind of high on the train that he might be ready to serve that backup role. I'd be fine with that. I think he is a candidate now to come in after Forsberg's contract is up. And I like Forsberg, but I think Sogard's got that ceiling where he can now be the starter in Belleville this year, with Maryland backing up. And then in a couple of years, if Sogard's ready, he can come in and eventually hopefully take the role from Corpusalo. But yeah, like, I know people are commenting too, the injuries were a real thing. Like, injuries for goalies are a big, big thing. And I don't want to say that he's like Matt Murray. Like, I don't agree with that take. But Corpusalo has never actually played 40 games or more in his career. So it is just a notable thing to kind of be wary of. But yeah, if the hip surgery helped him fully recover this past year, and that is a healthy Corpusalo, and again, he was on a terrible Columbus team for like most of the year. Like, they were really bad. He faced a lot of, like, he carried them actually through their worst times. I know Columbus fans, I've kind of talked to a few of them, and they said he really did carry them this year. Like, if this year is anything for what's to come for Corpusalo, Sens fans should be very, very happy. And although 5 years is scary, 4 million is not that bad for a goalie. You would have been paying that for a Freddie Anderson as well. And I don't know if Corpusalo is on the same level as him, but he is younger, and he is someone who could be their long-term starter if things work out.
Yeah, I like what Colin Sweeney says here, especially the last part. Honestly, better to have a terrible term than a terrible salary, and especially for a team like the Sens. I agree. You can't, there is such thing as bad term for bad players, but he's a good player, so I don't mind doing an extra year, extra 2 years than the Sens might have been actually comfortable doing. This is another one too from Nick Spence. That in the bubble, he didn't have a good regular season. In the bubble, he was a maniac for the Blue Jackets. He was unbelievable. I just remember that 4 overtime, I think it was 5 overtime games, and I'm pretty sure it was him in net for the Blue Jackets. Unless they swapped out.
941 save percentage through 9 games in the playoffs that year.
He was a maniac. So obviously, I guess injuries kind of followed him for the next 2 seasons after that. Got the hip surgery, and he was good. Here's the thing too. I was listening to the TSN panel as well, and early on when they have their goalie panel, and with Marty Biron, Jamie McLennan, and Kevin Weeks, and they were discussing goaltending options for Ottawa. And I think Craig Button was the one who mentioned he didn't want Tristan Jarry because he can't stay healthy, and that's Ottawa. I think I like the way Button put it. He said they can't afford him, not money wise, they just can't afford his health history. And I agree with that. It's just, I don't think signing guys based on their health history is a good move, and also not signing them because of their health history is a good move. So this is not a signing to make him your number one starter. He's going to get the majority of the games. This is a tandem signing, like we talked about. This is to be a 1A, 1B with Anton Forsberg if all goes well with Forsberg's summer. So I like it. I like it a lot. And again, they needed to do this. And it wasn't so much making a big splash in free agency. It was just addressing goaltending. And again, this is another big move that doesn't take away from the roster. I'm sure there were a lot of discussions. I'm sure they kicked tires on Connor Hellebuck, John Gibson, UC Saros, big names on the goalie market. but you'd have to give up DeBrincat plus to get those guys probably. So I like this. You just allocate cap space that you have at the moment to goaltending. And like I said, 6.75 for 2 goalies in a tandem kind of league. Not bad. Not bad at all. And you can definitely take that every day of the week.
Well, and on top of the giving up assets in a Saros trade or Carter Hart or somebody, the assets are one thing, the cap space is another. Those guys are going to cost you, like, I mean, a Connor Hellebuck, for example, or a UC Saros, once they get new deals, they're going to cost you like 8 million plus. And that is a very risky game to play, my friend, when you're paying one goaltender $8 million plus. Look at Bobrovsky. Like, I know that they just made that run and he got hot, but I do not like that contract for Bobrovsky. Like 10 million, I think it was 8 years. That's completely ludicrous. Like, that is very risky and takes away from the roster. I would rather have, and again, it is honestly hard to say about Corpusalo because I can't say I'd rather have Corpusalo just based on this year because his other years are concerning. But I'd rather have like half of what we saw this year from Corpusalo than at 4 million than like a Carter Hart at 8 million. Like I'd rather have that and spend the money elsewhere. So for me, yeah, I think this was a better option than trading. And I think this also tells you that maybe Dorian wasn't super comfortable on the trade market. Because like obviously Logan Thompson was another name that was thrown out there. I'd suggest like this also solidifies that in the DeBrincat trade, Ottawa's not getting a goalie, right? Like they're going to be getting hopefully a roster piece, a forward back in that deal. I know that goalies were kind of rumored, but this suggests that maybe Dorian wasn't comfortable giving up a haul for a goalie like teams were asking. I know Allmark and Swayman's name have been out there too. Corpusalo was someone who they wanted to acquire at the deadline, and they kind of got their guy here. I like the age too, right? Like 29. I think this is, you said it, it's going to be a tandem thing with him and Forsberg, but Forsberg is also coming off of 2 MCL tears. Like there's no guarantee Forsberg can stay healthy or even start the year completely healthy. And that's what screwed them last year is Talbot got hurt during camp and Forsberg got to take the whole load. And then they had that terrible start and they kind of had to overuse Forsberg. So I think right now, I guess Corpusalo is actually on TSN right now. That's what they're saying in the chat. Maybe I'll keep up with that. But I think Corpusalo kind of comes in, and if Forsberg's not healthy or not maybe recovering properly from his MCL tears, you've got your goalie, and we know Sogard can step in if necessary. So I think now you've got 3 goalies who I feel could play at the NHL level and be perfectly fine. Like I'd be confident with him, Corpusalo, Forsberg, and Sogard next year. So I think they've got good depth at that position, and they're going to be fine even if someone gets hurt.
Yeah, it's stability, and even if it doesn't, like, we don't have a crystal ball, neither do the Sens, neither do any of the players they sign. You can't tell what it's going to be like in 3 months. When the Talbot trade happened, everyone was saying this is a great move. He's an all-star goalie, all that. And then obviously we know how that played out. Phil Gustafsson had a Vezina caliber season, and Cam Talbot just couldn't stay healthy. Like a lot can go wrong and a lot can go right, though. I like Nick Spence here throwing it in the chat. Obviously, we can't really listen to what's going on right now on TSN. So if you guys want to keep throwing down what he's saying in the chat, and please don't lie. But chose Ottawa over multiple other offers. I believe that too, because if you're a player like Corpusalo who has this potential to be a starter, you got the term, you got the money. It would make sense that you pick this kind of location if they're offering a little bit more, maybe. And I mean, look, we can see why the Sens, this culture has mattered so much because players want to come here. It's proven now. It might sound crazy. This is probably one of the biggest free agent signings in team history. When you think about it, they don't do big signings on free agent day. Before Claude Giroux, it was Clark MacArthur, and that's it. Like they had other big guys who ended up being contributors, but I think other than that, this is one of the top goalies on the market, top 4 for sure. And they got him. And I don't count Freddie Anderson or Antti Ranta because they just go back to their teams. I don't know where Tristan Jarry is going to be. This could end up being the best, or not the best, I shouldn't say, but the biggest free agent goalie signing on July 1st, for sure.
Yeah, and this is a good one too. He'll be good for Levi as well. Dan Corey says that's a good point because Levi obviously being Finnish. I want to say Corpusalo was a 3rd round pick in 2012. So yeah, those are gonna have Finnish ties. Obviously Corpusalo too. If he plays like he did this past year, he's gonna be a big guy for Finland at the World Championships, maybe the future Olympics if NHL goes back. Like these are things that we can kind of think about now with having a Finnish goalie. Yeah, I just kind of threw on that stream with him. I couldn't hear it obviously, but I love the mustache he's got. You can see the ginger facial hair he's got. It's pretty slick looking with the long hair. Yeah, I mean, overall, like I just think this is a complete win. And I do think, like I said, the market was probably very competitive, especially because goalies had signed. Like there were so many goalies already taken. I know Tristan Jarry's still out there. I certainly liked Corpusalo more than him. I think Jarry's going to come in at even more than 4 million potentially, depending on who's left, like looking for a goalie. I know his projection was closer to 5 million. He's had injury problems. He hasn't been consistent. Um, the term definitely, it's just the term scaring people, and I agree, but I just don't see a reason to be negative about this. I do know that his numbers in Columbus were concerning, and obviously that's something to note. But Columbus was also not a very good team for a lot of that time, and Ottawa obviously is. And I think that, like we talked about, their defense is going to be a huge part in helping the goalie moving forward. Like they've hung their goalies out to dry very badly over the last few years and during the rebuild. I think actually Corpusalo just mentioned something about their defense being a strong reason as to why he likes the team. So I could be wrong about that, but I heard a little tidbit there about how he liked their defense.
Well,
So.
he's listening to the Everyday Sens podcast, so
Yeah,
we keep saying this. That's the strength on the team now, and it is.
Yep.
I'm assuming you have it out in front of you, the GSA X, the stat that I don't know how to say. The
goals
rank
saved above expected.
Goals saved above expected. Do you have the ranking for all goalies last year for a minimum of whatever amount of games, like 30 games or something? Because
yeah, hold on a sec.
Anton Forsberg was what, 18th? I want to say. I'm referencing a stat that I've seen, and I think he was top 20 in goal save above expected in the league last year. And just as Brendan kind of whips that up, I kind of threw him on the spot there, but I'm circling a point here because Corpusalo had a good year last year in that regard. There's a method to the madness that the Sens are doing in net. Like they've had a lot of trial and error in the last 3 years with goaltenders. So, I trusted that this was an informed decision. This isn't just, oh, he's the biggest name out there. Like they were in on him on the deadline for a reason too. And that it's because they recognize that this is a good goalie who can help them right now. And he's young or younger, right around the same age as Forsberg, which is perfect for their window right now.
Yeah. So, Corpusalo he ranked, I believe, I'm still trying to pull it up because Forsberg didn't face as much time or didn't play as many minutes. Corpusalo ranked 14th with 16.72, and then Forsberg ranked 41st with 2.94. Now, the year prior, though, Forsberg was much higher. He had, I think, around 10, but this past year he was closer to league average, which is around 0. Now, what I'm looking at doesn't even have a minimum time, so there's actually 107 goalies. So they were both in the top half of the league, like 14th and 41st. But I do think that based on this past year, Corpusalo was a level above Forsberg in the way he played. It's just like if you look back to last year, Forsberg was right there as one of the better goalies outside of the playoffs. So I think both of them provide potential, but Forsberg's injuries still do make me a little bit nervous. And I think this provides you with the great depth that you need. And potentially just the number one starter. Like they haven't had that in God. We go back to Anderson back in his prime years when they had a true number one starter. So if Corpusalo can be that, that would be huge for them. And again, like he's going to be 33 when this contract expires, or 34. So that's pretty average age for a goalie, right? So yeah, like, what do you have any other thoughts on it? Or do we have any comments here? How does the chat feel about this first?
Just a lot of mustache comments. People mentioning the term is a concern. It seems like more people are concerned about term than money, which I agree with as well. One thing we should also touch on though is that Brännström with $2 million 1 year. I wasn't a fan originally. I don't love that he just gets the 1 year and 2 million, because I know we talked about 1.5 range maybe, but the fact that it's a 1 year deal and at 2, pretty much, I think 2 is essentially the max of what I'd be comfortable giving him, and I think the Sens were too. So it feels like he kind of just squeezed them for everything here. But again, we don't know. We don't know if the team's throwing nothing at him, if he's just accepting the 1 year deal. But yeah, like what do you think about Brännström? And I want to get into some cap gymnastics after, because we've got a more clear picture now of what their cap situation is going to look like next year.
Yeah, I mean, I want a more term. We talked about it yesterday too, how I was hoping to get 2 or 3 years out of Brännström, just because I feel like he might price himself out of their range. Like he just broke out this past year, and 2 million was on the higher side for sure, and only 1 year. But I figured if they could get him for 2 or 3, you'd get the benefits of him at this maybe a lower price tag, and then next year he's probably going to get more than 2 million, I would guess, unless he takes a step back. But based on his age and progression, like I would think he'll take another step forward this year. In which case he's a likely candidate to go elsewhere after the season, because Ottawa can't keep allocating a crazy amount of money to their bottom pairing when they've got Jacob Chychrun and Jake Sanderson contracts on the horizon too. But yeah, either way, I'm happy that Brännström's back. Obviously, I expected that to happen. JBD too was only $805K a year, I think, which is a pretty good deal. I thought he'd get more like 900 to $1 million, but Brännström, I'm gonna write an article about all this as well. But Brännström is Obviously underrated aspect of the team, I would say. He was I know I had him 6th on my final power rankings this year for players. I thought he led the team in a lot of key metrics, and he was really good at managing the puck, which is where other players lacked. And he didn't have those unforced turnovers like a lot of other Sens defensemen have in past years. So 1 year times $2 million, good deal. It's kind of another prove it year though for him, right? Like I thought he would want more term. Maybe the team just didn't offer it to him. But yeah, he's back to a prove it deal where he's got to show he can take another step and then potentially find a top 4 role elsewhere. Like that's got to be on his mind right now, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned the goaltending and how much money. It's 6.75 of the cap is allocated to your two NHL goalies. Now the bottom pair, because we're just going to assume JBD, it's a one-way deal both years, meaning it's an NHL deal. If they send him down, he's got to go through waivers at $800K. That's very valuable for a team that's going to be right up against the cap too, right? So I believe Matt and Paolo was 850, maybe, or maybe it was less. It might have been 7 something. But
it was 840, I think, something like
that. 840, and I know it might seem like you're scoff at a 35,000 difference, but the Sens literally are probably going to need to squeeze all of that out. So that just gives way more value to JBD. I actually had him when we did that little mock thing a week ago. I had JBD at 2 years, 800K per, and I remember doing that, being like, he might get a bit more than that, but no, he got exactly that. And it's good because it lets you fit under the cap. So now your bottom pairing all of a sudden is making 2.8, and your middle pairing is Sanderson Zub barely making 5.5. And then your top pairing in Chikrin Shabbat obviously making way more, 12.6. But I think that's good allocation for the defense. And I like that bottom pairing. I'm assuming JBD is going to make the roster, especially with this deal. I'd be shocked if he's not there now. To me, it all but closes the door on a Travis Hamonic deal, unless Hamonic can get something anywhere else. Like I think again, with Twitter down right now and not working properly for some people, including myself, and I think you as well, not ideal for this day because I'm trying to follow everything, getting late notifications. I'm going through Instagram, which is not faster than Twitter usually, which is weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting the notifications, like they're still popping up, but when I'm trying to click on them, I can't see a damn thing. Yeah, so I know people are talking about, I'm going to butcher his name. So it's Boko Imama, I believe, who played with Thomas Chabot in St. John's growing up in the QMJHL, and Matthew Joseph as well, actually. They signed him. They also signed Rourke Chartier to another 2-way deal, and they signed somebody out of Pittsburgh too, who I'd love to say his name, but I can't get on Twitter. So they signed all of them to 2-way deals who were just going to be AHL guys. I know Boko did play for Arizona, though, and that was a pretty big deal when he came up and got a chance in the NHL. Just around the league, too, I'm just looking here. Max Domi just signed with the Capitals, so there's a name off. Carolina
so did Pacioretty, I think. I got that one
really
too.
Carolina signed Orlov, and they just signed Bunting as well for 3 years. So they just spent big on those two players, and like 12 million combined, I think.
Orlov's a good fit in Carolina.
Top free agent. Yeah, top free agent.
God, they always make good moves, don't they?
And then Nashville has had a big day. I was mocking the Leafs, of course, on Twitter. They paid a first, a second, 2/3, and Abramov, a prospect, Vitali's brother, by the way, from Ottawa, for Luke Shen and Ryan O'Reilly. They won a playoff series. Both of those guys signed in Nashville, so they lost them for nothing and paid a ton of assets. I love seeing that. It's so funny when people spend huge on rentals and then don't get them back. I love that. Has anybody else surprised you on the market? I've got Cap Friendly open here. That's my kind of way of keeping up with it aside from Twitter. They have like a list of everybody who's signed so far. So has anything else stood out to you a little bit today or what?
Not particularly. Obviously, I guess the goalies going back to Carolina was a little bit shocking, I'd say. Let's go through some other ones here. It's a lot of depth. Pacioretty in Washington's good, I think. Carson Soucy to the Canucks, that's a good signing for 3.25 for 3 years. Ian Cole also to the Canucks for $3 million. Wow, the Canucks just love giving out $3 million to people.
Wow, Justin Hall, 3 years, $10 million in Detroit. That is not a good contract.
The Detroit has butchered a lot of stuff. They got Ben Sherratt last summer, Justin Hall. Like, I can't wait to play them again because it's just going to be so fun. Like, Justin Hall and Ben Sherratt is going to be a pairing 100% next season.
Connor Brown to Edmonton too.
That's a good one. I love that deal. At $775 too. After, obviously, it sucks for Connor Brown in money. It sucks for him just because he obviously goes to Washington in his UFA year. And then I think in preseason, maybe the first game of the year, he blows out his knee and misses the entire season. So this is obviously a prove it deal for him. Edmonton's going to be one of the top cup contenders after this, especially. So I think that's a great addition. Morgan Geekie to Boston, 2x2. That's another good one.
There's been a lot of guys who we kind of pegged as depth options for Ottawa who've already signed, which is light. That's going to happen. Bruce also, by the way, reported this morning, Bruce Garriock, that Alex DeBrincat, a trade is kind of like on the horizon a little bit. He said they're working hard to trade him soon. They want to know their cap situation and what their return is going to be so they can kind of address the other aspects of their lineup. He just tweeted again, actually, that his wording is so funny, I find. He says, Sens continue to study a trade for disgruntled winger Alex DeBrincat. Haven't heard anything they've liked to this point, but the work continues. Not sure if it will happen today or not. It certainly sounds like Dorian is pushing hard here to get a move. I just think he wants to know like what they're going to get, because you're seeing the names being signed here. A lot of these guys could have replaced DeBrincat, and there's a few options left, but they're going to have to find somebody for that role. I do like Daniel Sprong as well, as being mentioned in the chat. But again, like, you need that top six guy if you can get him, or at least a middle six guy. It sounds like we're going to get a DeBrincat trade here in the next couple days. Nashville, I thought, was a good fit, and now they've signed. They spent a lot of money already, so I don't think that's necessarily a thing. David Pagnotta actually tweeted that Anaheim is very interested, quote unquote, in Alex DeBrincat now. They're picking up the steam. So that's an interesting one. They might be the best partner. That's legit.
Is that just now?
He tweeted it like 20 minutes ago, maybe.
Oh boy, I feel lost not being able to use Twitter. And I saw someone in the chat saying it's because Elon Musk is like, if you don't have Twitter Blue, they're weeding people out. But that would suck. But I would, if that's the case, he'd have me. I'd pay for it. I'm not gonna lie, because especially on today of all days. So still some names out there for sure. A lot of things are rolling in. I'm sure there's a lot of done deals already that haven't been announced. Connor Clifton to Buffalo, 3.33 times 3 years. That's a good deal for Buffalo. I like him a lot. Buffalo also got Erik Johnson on a 1-year deal at $3 million. They kept Tyson Jones. I'm just kind of going through divisional stuff here. James Reimer to Detroit, 1.5 million for 1 year. The Bruins and Red Wings have been busy, it looks like, for the Atlantic at least. And obviously Toronto Maple Leafs' big July 1st signing was Ryan Reaves. What do you think about that? Because I know Ottawa was kind of rumored to be interested in him, and obviously didn't work out. But they're all like, I like Reaves. I'll just say myself, I would have liked him. I think interesting, dynamic to have on the team. He's a fun personality. 3 years is not anywhere close to what I'd be comfortable doing. So obviously I can see why he went to the Leafs for 3 years.
That's an interesting talk we can actually have, because this is kind of a big thing. I know Mark Mathot keeps getting after people for it a little bit, but it's the whole toughness thing, right? Because Reaves, like, analytically, and I mean production wise, and really anything aside from fighting, like, he's completely useless. Not to be rude, he does not provide any sort of hockey like scoring or possession. Like, he's just literally a huge body who goes out there and fights. Now, he's a great locker room guy. Apparently, he sounds like a great teammate. So then you weigh the options of, like, it's like an Austin Watson, but even lesser, where is it worth having a veteran guy who's a good leader and a big hitter and a fighter, but is not, like, he's probably going to be hemmed in his own zone a lot of the time? Or would you rather have, somebody who can kind of combine those two things, maybe as a lesser of a fighter? But I don't know. For me, I would have liked Reaves at maybe $1 million. I know they got him for 1.35 for 3 years. Would have been fine with that. But at the same time, if you're signing a guy like that, to me, they have to know that they're going to be the 13th forward a lot of the time. Like, they shouldn't be guaranteed a lineup spot. Like, he shouldn't just be penciled in on Toronto's fourth line and never be taken out. I think if things aren't working and they need to kind of have, and they're getting hemmed in on that fourth line, then he should be someone who's a candidate to come out. Like, that's my theory. And same with Austin Watson. He's a great, like, goon type of guy who comes in and is scary for hits and stuff. But if the team is struggling to score or is getting hemmed in and is getting scored against when he's on the ice, you have to change it. Like, these are guys who I see as the 13th forward, not the 12th. So I think Ottawa could find a cheaper version of that somewhere on the market too.
Yeah, me too. Also should say, I think Austin Watson's I'm not going to say far better, but he's a better player than Ryan Reaves.
Yeah, he provides more on the ice. Yeah.
Yeah. And Reaves, I like it for the Leafs just because Reaves brings that element of, like, he's legitimately the best fighter in the NHL, and it's not even close. Now, fighting's on the way out. It doesn't happen as much, but for a team like the Leafs, who keep getting body bagged and pushed around in the playoffs, whether it's for, I know they were all up in arms about the refs this year and stuff like that, but I like the move in that sense. I know it's a playoff move that you got to deal with in the regular season and stuff, but there are nights where their top players just get pushed around. And I like this idea that you got Ryan Reaves there now. Like you honestly can't get any tougher than that if you're the Leafs. So good move for them. It'll be interesting to see what the Sens do. I don't think they'll, you're not going to look and do anything in response to that move in general. But yeah, I think I'm glad the Sens didn't do that. Now, I said I wanted to get out on some cap stuff, some cap gymnastics. Is Cap Friendly updated with all of the Ottawa Senator signings? Like, is it on their cap hit now? I know that sometimes takes a while.
I'm just gonna check here. I believe it is because yes, yeah, Corpusalo is in there. Yeah.
Okay, so what is the cap space looking like for the Ottawa
Okay,
Senators?
well, so right now they've got 73,200,000, which is 10 million of cap space, just over 10 million, and that is with DeBrincat as an RFA. Pinto is still an RFA. Those are the only two RFAs they've got to sign. Pinto and DeBrincat, who DeBrincat will probably be a sign and trade. So probably 2 million for Pinto. They have around 8 to maybe 8.5 million in cap space right now. And I still think that they could move more if they needed it in Matthew Joseph potentially, but I don't know if that's a likely thing to happen. They still have like just under 10 million in cap space, so they can go out and upgrade the depth. They could get a DeBrincat replacement for 3.54 million. Like, I think they still have options here, even though they just signed Corpusalo.
So my question is there a world where, I know you did it the other day and like it was tough to work the cap around it. Is there a world where the arbitration deal for DeBrincat works now with these signings that they've done today?
See, it's so tough though, because if you
It's
give him
tight.
7.65, you have less than a million left to to sign a depth player. You can't even get like a bottom six forward now. You'd have to just roll with your young
Right.
guys and
It
hope for
would
the
it
best.
would just be entry level contracts all around.
That's what I
Maybe,
mean.
yeah.
Now,
Okay.
again, though, we have to note that long term, it still would work. Like, you'd have to bite the bullet this year, run with a Greg, a Crookshank, somebody else on the right side. But like in 3 years, the cap is expected to jump by 10 million. And at that point, having to brink it on for if you did sign him, or even just obviously this year, and then he gets traded, whatever, you're gonna have a lot of room still. So this year and maybe next year would be tough, but it would still work long term. I, I'm at the point where I need to see this team compete. So it's hard for me to be like, keep looking at the long term. We looked at the long term 5, 6 years ago. Like, this is the now, right? Like, we want to compete. So I don't know. I don't know if I'd be comfortable running a bottom six of like Crookshank, Pinto, and Joseph, and then Sokolov, Kastelik, and Kelly. Like, I just don't think I'd be comfortable doing that again because it didn't really work with those similar combinations last year, right?
There's got to be a good hockey trade out there for DeBrincat. Like, there absolutely has to be. We still don't know where Tyler Bertuzzi's going, but let's assume that the teams that are in on him, let's say it's 5 teams, right? 4 teams are going to leave that disappointed, looking for help, looking for more scoring. I know the Washington Capitals were rumored to be in on DeBrincat. I'd imagine now they're not. They got Domi and Max Pacioretty. Pretty value signings for them, especially. Yeah, if you're Dorion now, look, the Ducks are fascinating because you can get, I mean, I don't know, like they don't, I mean, Henrique is probably a guy who would come back in that deal, I would imagine, and then some kind of futures, maybe a young guy that they don't have room for on the roster anymore. They're not going to give up Mason McTavish. They're not going to give up Zegras, obviously. Like, those guys aren't going to be on the move. So it's interesting what the Sens would be after with Anaheim. Other than, I mean, I would have said John Gibson yesterday, but they don't need him anymore.
Well, they have a lot of top prospects, Anaheim. That's the tough part. They have a lot of, as we quote, untouchables, where they're not going to trade them. Like, I mean, a lot. They have a really nice prospect pool, man. Like, have you looked at that thing?
I think
So
they have the best in the league.
they drafted Carlson, and then they've got McTavish, who's young, but they've got Zellweger, they've got Mintyukov, is how you say it, I guess, something like that. Even in net, they've got Kale Klang. Like, man, they are built. They are built. Like, they've got Jamie Drysdale up front too on defense. I don't know what they'd give up because I don't feel like they're going to give up any of those guys. Like, those are just your untouchable type of guys. But at the same time, I mean, if they are very, like Pagnotta said, they're very interested. It seemed like he was really linking them. They do have some nice pieces. Like, they've got like a Ryan Strome, a Max Jones. these guys aren't like incredible players, but I know Troy Terry was actually one name who was being thrown around as potentially he would be like the best ad you could possibly get. He's very, very good. I don't know if they'd give him up either. They actually signed Radko Gudas today too. The Ducks, by the way, that's another kind of big signing, $4 million a year. I don't think that we would get Gibson anymore, obviously, but yeah, they're a good fit for Ottawa for sure. With that, I just wanted to go back to Corpusalo for a minute. So Ian Mendez tweeted and he said that the Sens are very firm that Corpusalo is going to be their playoff guy. He's going to be their guy that leads them to the playoffs and is their main guy. So I think they're signing him with the intention of him being the number one guy who's going to kind of beat Forsberg out of that job.
Okay, well, that I have a lot of questions about that. Then for the Sens, is like, are you just, is Forsberg okay? Because they had all the confidence in the world. I mean, Dorion said at the end of the year he will be one of our goalies next year. Are they both the guy? I don't have a problem with them handing over the net to Corpusalo full time because I think he can do it if he's healthy enough. But I still see this as a tandem thing. I don't know why. That's an interesting angle, I guess, for the Sens to take. But I mean, sure, like if he's healthy, but like you said, he's never played more than 30, 40 games in his career.
His career high is 39. And again, though, like injuries played a factor. So if he's healthy, I do think he could be that number one guy. It's just so risky. Like he's such a weird, he's the unicorn of the goalie market for free agents because like he's 29 and he's played a lot of seasons, but he's actually very unproven. Like he's had this one standout year. So as we've talked about with DeBrincat, the trends would suggest that Corpusalo is going to regress. And this was just an outlier year, which would be bad for Ottawa. But at the same time, like goalies do break out a little bit later, and he did show flashes before his injury history started to kick in when he first started in the league. So it's risky for sure, but at the same time, like, I mean, this was a really good year for him, right? And people are concerned and wary too because he didn't have a great playoffs, even though he did probably outplay Stuart Skinner. Either way, yeah, we've kind of hit everything on Corpusalo, I think, but otherwise, I still expect Ottawa to be active today. I think that from what Garriock and Pagnotta and everybody's saying, it seems like the DeBrincat thing is kind of next on their list here. They might add a depth player, but it seems like Dorion wants to get this DeBrincat thing sorted before adding one of the bigger fish potentially. People have kind of talked about here too. I know like Killorn is still available. Who are the other big fish are still available? So you've got Killorn, you've got Zucker, Thomas Tatar is one I like. I know he's not as physical as people like, but he's a guy you could probably get for $3 million and he's going to produce for you. There are some relatively big names still out there, to be honest with you, who could fit Ottawa's needs, especially on that second line. How would you feel about like how much would you want to spend maybe on a Killorn or a Zucker? Like, would you go up to $5 million, $4 million? Like how much would you be thinking?
First of all, I'm greedy. I want both. I'd get Zucker's probably. I think I don't know. Well, here's a question: who's going to get more? Who's more expensive? Because I think they're pretty similar. Zucker had a good year though, man. He had a lot. I think he had 30 goals, maybe
something like that. Yeah, he
26, 25. Yeah, he had a really good year. I remember when the Sens played them, especially towards the end of the year. He's just a bulldog. He's a bulldog of a player. I'll give Liam Martian some credit there. He said he wants the Sens to have some dogs. I think was his quote, and I like that because he wants some players with some bite. I think that's Jason Zucker. I think that's Alex Killorn to a T. Now, I don't know who I'd want more. I'll go with Killorn just because he's got the cups. But if it's either or, it's a cop out, but I'm happy with either. I would give Killorn 4.5.
I wonder what Tampa offered him because they said that Tampa pushed really hard until the 11th hour today to get him signed. I think they were offering him term though because they don't have a lot of space.
Well, it sounds like they probably offered like a Nick Paul type thing, like a 7-year deal, but you can only make 2.5, 3, which is a ridiculous contract.
Crazy. I still can't believe they signed Paul for 7 years. That's wild, but I mean it works. Like it's a fine deal. But I do like the idea. I don't know if they'd get both of these players, but if Dorion can go out and get one of these guys, and I don't have. I'm struggling so hard to keep my friggin' list open with all the free agents. But there's a list of all the free agents and the top guys. There are still like a lot of guys that are available. I'd like for them to get one of those bigger fish and then sign. Like Daniel Sprong is a great example of a guy who I feel could step in on the third line alongside Pinto and produce and be an offensive, but also a defensive guy, be that two-way type of player while scoring 40 points. And I think that if they could get a Killorn, for example, and add a Sprong for a bit cheaper on the third line, and then you've got Corpusalo in net. Maybe they sign Calvin DeHaan as a depth defenseman, 7th, 8th guy. Like, I would really like that look of that lineup. I mean, I think the lineup would look a lot better that way. And we keep also having to remind ourselves about the DeBrincat return. because I expect them. And the big thing that's holding this up, as per reports, is that they want to get a roster piece back. They want a player back. They don't want, I'm guessing that the teams are offering them futures. Like, my guess would be that everybody interested is saying, like, here, have our 2024 first, and then we'll give you something else. And they're like, we want to win. Like, we don't want your 2024 first. Because Garriock keeps kind of hinting at, well, they want to get a piece that can help them now. I'm thinking like a Nicholas Waugh from Vegas, for example. That's the type of player I'm seeing who would be like a potentially middle six type of player. Jonathan Berggren from Detroit, that type of guy. And I just feel like teams are hesitant to do that. But if they can get that, and then they sign a Killorn or somebody, that lineup looks really good. Like, go theorize that for in cap friendly to everybody in the chat for a moment, and you'll be quite pleased with how it looks with Korpisalo and net as well.
Yeah, that's enticing. Connor Sherry signed in Tampa for 3 years, $2 million annual average value. Alex Lyon in Detroit. So Detroit now with Reimer and Lyon. I thought they have Husso though, don't they? So this is like some camp competition. I'd imagine maybe Lyon's on a two-way. Yeah, so they've got a crowded crease now. But yeah, so there's it's so hard because with Anaheim, if Anaheim's pushing hard, I don't know, like, can you pry one or two good roster pieces that you're satisfied with out of that if you can't sign another free agent? Like, I don't know, because I think it might be a scenario where you get a Ryan Strome back and a protected first round pick from Anaheim or something like that. Because that's what it seems like it's going to be to me, because Anaheim especially, I don't think there's two solid roster pieces like the Dubois deal with LA that you can really pry out of there that would be worth DeBrincat. You know what I'm saying?
They're more of a futures kind of package in my mind, but I do like Ryan Strome. I don't know if I'd want to pay him $5 million. But if you could get that retained, I know, like, I'd have to look more into them. I didn't even consider them a real sort of option. I just didn't think they'd go for DeBrincat. Like, I know they've got Isaac Lundstrom. I don't know what kind of production these players put up, but they are names who kind of ring a bell in my head. You know, those types of players. Frank Vetrano had a few good years in New York, like Max Jones too. I don't know. Anaheim, though, they have a lot of good prospects. If you could get one of those top young prospects, that would be nice too. But I think we are looking for more of a current package there for DeBrincat. Now, yeah, the Cam Talbot signed with the Kings. There's so much happening. My brain's just jumping from topic to topic here. He signed a 1 year, $1 million deal with the Kings. They can have fun with that. I'm not a big Talbot guy anymore.
Basically traded Corpusalo for Talbot.
Pretty much. And I would much rather Corpusalo at this point. Corpusalo, by the way, his contract is structured more top heavy in regards to his actual money. A little bit, he gets $4 million, then $5 million, $4.5 million. Then his last 2 years are $3.5 million and $3 million in regards to base salary. And he got no signing bonuses because Ottawa has never liked to do signing bonuses. But yeah, like, do you have anything else on free agency? Or are we going to stick around and be a, we could do another emergency pod if they sign somebody else? I don't know what's going to happen today, or if a DeBrincat trade happens too, I'm planning to hop right back in here. So,
we'll be on call. We'll be on call for most of the day. I think we can leave it there because I can't use Twitter right now. It's infuriating, and I'm lost. I'm a lost soul without it. But obviously, I'll just tune into the Free Agent Frenzy on TSN and on Sportsnet and stuff like that. So so thanks everyone who joined us. I think we'll wrap up there. We have covered Joonas Korpisalo joining the Ottawa Senators as their starting goalie. We have now learned, I guess, through Ian Mendez, they want him to be their starter, and some competition for Forsberg and Camp maybe. But either way you spin it, it is a solid goaltending duo again in Ottawa. Tidy work from Pierre Dorion. 5-year, $4 million a year for Joonas Korpisalo. He's coming to the nation's capital. Happy Canada Day, everyone, if we don't see you again today. And we'll see you for the next episode, which will come out on Monday regardless. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in.